Welcome back to a brand new season of Rip It Up. Every renovation teaches you something, but it's only after you've lived through the dust, the delays and the decisions, and then done it again like me, that the real lessons appear. This season, we're revisiting our biggest renovation topics, not with theory, not with optimism, but with hindsight. Process, planning, lighting, kitchens, bathroom, windows, what worked, what didn't, and what we'd never do the same way again. This is What We Wish We Knew Then.
Okay, welcome back to the podcast. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Jen. Happy New Year.
I'm excited about this one.
Like we haven't seen each other already loads of times, but you know.
Happy New Year. Excited about this. Let's crack in. We're going to keep these short, sharp, like packed full of tips,
nuggets,
gems, lessons learned. Let's go. So this first episode of our new series, we're back talking about the phase, like you're back to the start. You're thinking about your renovation. And one of our most popular episodes is one of our first, like what are the phases? Like what's happening? What's the sequence of events?
Yeah.
So let's get
because
into
it's
Phase
confusing,
one.
right?
Yeah, and you don't know. How would you know?
And there's a lot of new
You've never done it before,
terminology if
probably.
this is your first time round. The process, the milestones, the phases, like what the hell is coming next? When do I have to stuff order by? Anyway, we're going to cover it all.
And that's why it's important as well, is because you do have to have decisions made at a certain time. And there's nothing worse than a builder who is looking at you saying, hello, where's the bathroom stuff? Or where do you want your plugs and your sockets and your lighting to go? And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's a big decision. So,
yeah.
Okay. So back to the very start, the very first phase of renovation is figuring out who are you going to be working with.
Yeah. Or who do you need to hire? Like what professionals do you need?
Who do you need to hire?
Yeah. Do you need an architect? A lot of people ask me that actually when I do one-to-ones. Do I need an architect? It really depends on like what you're doing, I guess, how big the project is. Like, are you building a new extension or are you just renovating an existing structure? Maybe you have a builder that's really experienced in that. So I don't know. How did you decide you wanted?
My house was a big renovation and it needed a lot of clever design thought, not just drawings of something that I knew I wanted already, but it really needed consideration about layout, about use of space, about lighting and light coming in. So it definitely needed an architect. That just wouldn't have been possible otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily to say that the scale is what will dictate it. But I think if there's a lot of changes being made, and you're not just, pushing one wall out, or you're not just, you know what something's going to look like, I think it's worth it.
Yeah,
Definitely
for sure.
worth it.
And I also think in my scenario, the first time round in Dublin, I hired an architect, but I hired an architect because it was a protected structure. We were doing an extension and he had a lot of relevant experience in those types of houses and those types of properties. So that's for me, like what made my decision. I looked at his portfolio, liked his style, liked they'd done old houses before. So that made the decision for me. I couldn't do a protected structure without an architect, nor would I have wanted to be honest.
It was the same for me in that hiring an architect depended on someone who had done this type of house before. Who'd made the mistakes in all the previous houses, who knew
the mistakes,
how to work with small spaces, how to maximise it, what could be done in costs, all that kind of stuff. So that was really, really important for me.
Yeah. And then in terms of builder, like I went with some recommendations from my architect that they had worked with before, and that tends to happen smoothly, I guess, because they worked together before, they know how they work together. So that's how I got our first and our second builder, is through the architect actually. So we did go to tender in our first house. We didn't in our second. We just negotiated a price directly.
Yeah.
And the tender process, that's a whole other kind of ball game. Like, but if you go the tender process, then you might need to get a QS and stuff. And yeah, it depends. It depends if you want to go out to tender and get 5 prices and all that. In today's market, it's kind of tricky.
And it can be really worth getting a QS, especially if it's a really big job. You really need to keep, tight control of prices. Sometimes they might provide like project management services. That might be something that maybe your architect doesn't provide. So they definitely, there's plenty of cases where they're well worth it and they'll save you money in the long run. I was the same, finding a builder who'd worked at my architect. We didn't even go to tender. And the reason is, and we always say this, like thinking about a house build, it's a working relationship, it's a team. And a team that work well together is going to hit the ground running. It's going to be much smoother. You know, they'll understand each other's language. There'll be less communication mistakes and errors and all that kind of stuff, which is, you know, why a lot of things go wrong in lots of scenarios.
I'm a strong believer that a QS will pay for themselves for the most part. And if you're inexperienced in these kind of projects, you probably need a QS, because you've probably heard terms then like BOQ and stuff, and you're like, what the hell is this? Like you'd be like a deer in the headlights the first time round. And we had a friend of my husband's who was a QS the first time, who did a bill of quantities for us, which is essentially just like a shopping list for your renovation in Excel. But it's you know, it's done by rate and by unit and whatever. It is a complicated doc. And like, if you haven't been through it before, it's hard to process all that information. So like, I do think a QS will save you money in the long run, but I also understand that people see it as an additional upfront cost that maybe they don't have.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
So,
but I think it's worth it.
For this section, what's your biggest mistake or kind of lesson learned for you in terms of like who you hired and when?
So probably the biggest lesson learned was that communication is key. It really is. And having somebody that communicates well with you, that responds on time, that you know, talks to you with respect, that like that you can get along with on a working relationship for the next, you know, what's probably going to be about at least 6, potentially 12, maybe even more months, is really important. So I would say definitely, if you're going out to tender, don't just go with the cheapest quote, especially if they only come back to you with like a 1-pager of pricing. Communication is key. Good communication is a great indicator.
Yeah, and I think you said that time and time again, like you have to be able to get on with them. That's such a good bit of advice. If you just don't like someone, don't hire them because they're cheaper, because you still have to work with them all the time. And it's an intense working relationship, right? I think my biggest lesson learned is like what you said there, don't just go with the cheapest quote. I've seen such variation in quotes come back for me, like when we went to tender the first time, but also clients where like they vary by 50, 75%. And like you said, like one bill of quantity could be really high, priced really high, but it's really detailed. And another one is a 1-pager doc with like 10 whatever sections priced out, very top level. But what you'll see in those kind of quotes is there could be a lot more variation as the build goes on. So like, I think the tighter it's priced at the outset, the more likely you are to stick to that price. And also I find the cheapest tender quote to come back typically will be padded out by the end of the build. So don't always think they'll finish cheapest.
Yes, totally agree with that. They're hidden costs. They might be doing it just to get the job. And you might get a really expensive quote back as well from somebody who doesn't really want the job. So that what we're not saying either go with the most expensive one, but don't just default to the cheapest.
You have a bit of a sanity check of a few of them if you are going to tender, and take each one with a little pinch of salt. You know, there could be a bit of variation in them as the process progresses, we'll say. But next phase I was thinking about was pre-build decisions. So like when you've kind of your design done, like one of the biggest things for me is when you start to go into that demolition / early construction phase, you really need to know where things are going to be. And mainly you need to know where your kitchens are going to be, where your bathrooms are going to be, because plumbing routes have to be decided. And like M&E plans, mechanical and electrical plans. So like, you know, the layouts for your plumbing and stuff like that. So they're the kind of core structural elements, as well as say things like your waste and drainage and all that have to be mapped out before a lot of the concrete comes on site, we'll say.
Because I did hear a story about that recently of somebody who had a, you know, really good architect and good architect plan, and then it turns out that like a small extension to a utility in the back of the house that they didn't need was going to cost something like an extra 20 grand, because the drainage and the plumbing would all have to be moved. So knowing that in advance and not just necessarily saying, knock that out, let's put that wall there or put that wall here, but really mapping out like, where is the plumbing going? Where's the drainage? Where's the electrics? Where's all that is really, really important in getting like preventing issues down the line and preventing unnecessary expenditure as well.
And it's interesting to kind of see what you can work with that's already there if you're doing a renovation in terms of layouts and mapping. You know, you might keep the same routes, but also consider if you're putting in a new bathroom, where's that plumbing layout going to go? Because it has to have wastewater, it has to have a toilet waste, which is quite a big pipe. They all have to go somewhere and leave that room somewhere, and has to be connected into the main waste and drainage. So like, where are those pipes going to be? You know, you have to consider like if you're putting an ensuite somewhere there wasn't one before, those pipes are going to be boxed out in your living room downstairs directly below or on the external wall. So like all those things should be kind of roughly considered, like those positions. And those positions, I would say very early on, are locked. So see what you can work with rather than just moving everything for the sake of moving everything.
Yeah, agreed. That point about having a pipe boxed off in a room is so important, because you might have, say you want to add like as you said, an ensuite bathroom upstairs in a bedroom, and the pipe work ends up coming down through, I don't know, your main living room, even whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You might be designing that living room later on with a square shape in mind, but actually there's going to be a box in the corner that's going to, come into the living room, that's going to change the shape of it, that's going to alter what kind of couch you can put in, where you can put the TV, all that kind of stuff. So it sounds small, but those are the bones of the house. Like, that is the skeleton of the house, and you can't move that stuff afterwards. It's really, really difficult. So like having that map early is really, really important.
And also if they come in internally in another room in your house, you might hear a toilet flush as the water goes through that. But honestly, you'll hear the water go through that pipe, even if it's boxed out, unless it's completely insulated, you could hear that. So the last thing you want is to hear a toilet flush in your dining room
or something, and then you're waking somebody up.
Yeah,
waking up your guest every time you go to the toilet.
My biggest, I won't say mistake, but lesson learned here is like, those pipes have to go somewhere when you put a new bathroom in or a new kitchen position or something like that. So like, really consider where you want it, where it's needed. Is there an easy route for those waste pipes to go? And same goes for like electrical. Like, are you rewiring completely and does it matter? All the walls could be ripped back because you're doing the full gut of the house anyway, and it might make a massive difference. But if there were things already in position, say for example in old houses where you have ceiling rows and you have a pendant light, do you want to go wrecking those old ceilings and putting a load of spots in them or whatever? So like, really consider what you need here, what you need chased, what you need dug into solid walls versus what might be partition walls or whatever. But that's my kind of biggest lesson. See what you can live with as the current layout stands.
Yeah, and mine is, I think, really similar. It is, at this point, the most important thing is to be thinking about, how are you using the house? How does the house work day to day? What rooms are you in? What are you doing in those rooms? What are the considerations for each of those rooms? And at that point in planning, you're probably excited by Pinterest and looking at Instagram and looking at colours and thinking about like the lighting and the rooms and the layouts and blah, blah, but really strip it all back and just think about, this is the time of day that I'll be in this room, or my family will be in this room, or whatever. This is what we're going to be using it for. And therefore this means that, that light should go there, or that pipe should go here, or whatever it might be. Think about how you're using it and how should it be built then.
Now this phase, those are the pre-built kind of decisions, but you're running directly into your first fix here, right? So we're starting to talk about first fix. First fix is probably the most important phase in your build in terms of like you said, building that skeleton or that structure or that framework for the house. This is the point of no return, right? Once you've this decided, and this is to your point, like about the architect moving a utility space or whatever, maybe drainage was set then, and to actually change that is a huge deal, right? But consider this your point of no return, but also consider this as where you have to make a shitload of decisions. So be ready for this part.
Yeah, and it's earlier than you might think.
Yeah.
You might not be ready to make those decisions, because the outcome of the decision is, where is a plug going to go? Where is a light going to go? And you might not have your lighting chosen yet. You might not know exactly where your furniture is going to go yet. And therefore you might not know exactly where your plugs are going to go yet. But you need to know earlier than you think where it will probably go. Most likely. So first fix means it's relevant to plumbing and drainage, and it's relevant to electrics. So that means where are the pipes going to go? Where are the connection points? So where's your toilet and your sinks, etc., and your shower? Where are they going to be roughly? It doesn't have to be down to the millimeter, but it needs to be pretty close. And then where are your electrics going to go? Where roughly do you think your plug sockets are likely to be? Where roughly do you think your switches and your wiring for the lights are going to be?
Yeah. And this is something that like you have to do the sanity check on, right? You can't leave this up 100% to your builder, because you need to know the positions of your toilets, your taps, if they're wall taps versus deck taps that sit in your basins, because they'll have to chase the walls for those kind of things. Your underfloor heating system, that it goes back to your boiler and those positions, so all that stuff.
And it doesn't run under your appliances in your kitchen.
Exactly. And especially if you're pouring concrete, like a concrete slab like I was this time, there is no going back once that concrete goes down. So if those pipes aren't there, it's a big upset, And we missed one thing where we asked for a hot return, which is kind of like a circulation pump that runs around your house that keeps hot water to all the taps at certain times of the day when you need it. So you're not waiting for the hot water to heat up for ages. That wasn't put in before we poured our concrete. So the fix for that afterwards was massive. We had to dig a trench the whole perimeter of the house and do a lagged pipe. So those few things that you've kind of specified, positions for things, types of taps, heights of things, you need to do that sanity check at this stage. And it feels like a lot, and it is a lot. But once this
it is a lot.
It's a lot of decisions, isn't it? But this first fix is so critical. It's so critical to know where your lights are going, where your taps are, where your toilets are, and really map those out. And you can breathe a little bit after this, I think, because everything else is somewhat kind of tweakable a little bit after this.
If you do it right.
If you do it right, exactly. That's my biggest mistake. Our biggest mistake was we missed a serious pipe that should have gone in before our concrete slab was done.
Oh, God.
What was your lesson? Any mistakes or lessons learned in your first fix?
To be honest, no, it actually went well. We had it planned out really well. And also my house is very small, so the amount of decisions to be made are pretty small.
Yeah.
I think a lesson learned was that I just put sockets everywhere. If I thought I might even potentially want a plug anywhere, in it went.
Now, the only thing I would say is sockets and switches, if you want to buy fancy brass ones, they're expensive. So every socket and switch you put in, and trust me, you're up in the hundreds if you're doing a 3 or 4 bed house by the time you add in all your sockets, all your switches, across all the rooms.
Yeah.
It's expensive because those can be up at 80, 100 quid a set if you're buying fancy ones, maybe even more if you're going for really fancy ones. But they add up. And then when you're buying those, you have to obviously go with a shopping list of ones you want to your electrician, and maybe they'll source them. But, you're kind of putting in sockets willy-nilly, but you're like, oh, that's 100 quid, that's 100 quid, that's 100 quid. And then the price to fit them is per unit with the electrician as well.
Yeah.
Now, in saying that, you'll probably never regret putting in an extra socket.
You'll never regret it. You'll never regret it. Be aware of the cost.
And the ones that are hidden, you can put in basic plastic ones, right? And the ones that are on show, you might spring for the more expensive ones. But it's definitely a lesson learned. You'll regret not putting in a socket if you have to trail a cable across your floor,
Yeah. I just think, again, for this phase, even for first fix, you have to start marrying now how you're using the house and what you want it to look like, because you do need to start thinking about, you don't have to choose your lighting, but you need to know roughly, are you going to have wall lights there? Of course you will. You're not going to have spotlights. So,
and for that,
it's pretty early.
Yeah. For that first fix, although you don't have to select your finishes yet for the house, some valves and things like that for, say, bathrooms, shower valves, stuff like that, or where your shower head is going, or radiators, you kind of will need to know what ones you're picking, because the radiator pipe spacing will be a certain size, so you need to know what radiator is going to go there, even though it doesn't have to be on site yet. Or for your showers, you might need the valve in the wall, but you might need the actual faceplate and all the fancy stuff yet. So sometimes you have to have the stuff picked, but maybe not installed. So it is a heavy section of the renovation process, I suppose, and a lot of decisions to be made.
We had a top tip for this one, actually, that's worth thinking about at this stage, that was really popular, which is when you're designing your shower, to put the controls of your shower at the entrance of the shower and not necessarily under the shower head, so that you don't have to be standing under the shower to turn it on.
Yeah.
And that's something you can think about at first fix.
Yeah, if you have the space for it. So next phase, second fix. This is where it kind of gets fun, right? You love this when they start plastering.
The rubber hits the road here.
Woohoo!
The rubber hits the road. I love
when they start plastering.
I love it.
And
it's
some
magic.
of the fancier, bigger bigger fixings and finishes start to go in. Like these are really tweaks and not redesigns and relayouts, not relaying out things. But it's a tricky one to schedule because everyone wants to go last. Like everyone that's fitting, like all your flooring people will be like, we should be last. We should be last. The painters are like, we should be last. Everyone wants to go last because then their shit isn't ruined throughout the rest of the build. Yeah. So it's a tricky one to manage and schedule, especially if you're going kind of direct to some suppliers rather than your contractor or whatever. But this is, you might start to kind of second guess your decisions here, but trust the process, I suppose.
And it's
that would
frustrating.
Be my
it's interesting
lesson.
to think about. The sequencing is important here because if you are not going through a main contractor and you are organising those people to come in, you do have to be careful about who comes in when, because you don't want your kitchen installers to ruin your paint. They won't. Good ones won't. But, you need to think about what's the impact of each one coming in and what's the best sequencing, like what will end up in the best finish. Yeah,
like, look, it's hard to get it all right. It's so hard to get everything in the order perfect. Everyone, like I said, wants to go last because their thing will get destroyed. But just as a watch out, we put in our beautiful wood floor, which is probably one of the more expensive finishes we put in the house, earlier than we probably should have. And I have a few marks from a scaffold that also went up for later work, so or my fireplace was destroyed and then the slate hearth was dinged. So it'll never be perfect, but just keep whatever finished items you can away from a site as long as you possibly can. That would be my advice for this phase, I would say. Yeah, totally. And then I guess in parallel with these phases, like first fix, second fix, you just have to keep in back of your mind, like when are those things happening and what are the lead times for the things you're ordering? Yeah. Because you may need to make those decisions, but you also need to order the things for those. So although, say your builder says, I need the valves here for the showers, and all the plumbing fixings for first fix by March 10th, you're like, okay, work backwards from March 10th, your valves could be 3 or 4 weeks lead time. So you have to order them a good bit before that to make sure you have them. Don't maybe send everything to site because some stuff could get damaged. I got them all delivered to my house and then brought down just the valves and then labelled all the boxes separately for later. But
labelling everything is genius because people don't read emails.
It's genius until some people just dump them all out of it into a big bath. On site,
it's the best you can do.
Yeah, it is. But label everything. And even when it comes to fitting this stuff, mark the walls with a big permanent marker or something, just say this is where the valve goes, this is where the tap goes. Or if you have a printout for a specific requests or layouts or something that's slightly off standard, stick it to the door of that room or stick it to the wall of that room so they can't miss it. Yeah. Because if it's in a doc somewhere online, they're just not going to see it. That's my experience.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Because they're too busy. They're building your house. They're not necessarily stopping every 2 minutes to check what's on the thing. So that's an important one. And not every builder is going to give you, most builders won't give you a schedule in advance of when you need to have those decisions made. So go to them and ask, when do you need to have, when do you expect the kitchen needs to be here by? When do you expect the windows and doors need to be here by? When do you expect the flooring? When do you expect your bathrooms, your tiles, your sanitary ware? Furniture is one that often tricks people because especially if you're getting something made or you want a custom sized couch or something like that, you could be looking at weeks. And if it's coming up to Christmas, you're looking at a lot of weeks because it's really, really busy. Yeah. So
but order ahead really, and some places will hold them for you maybe for a couple of weeks. It's better having them sit there waiting for you to get them delivered rather than looking for them and then having nowhere to sit. Yeah. But don't send them too early.
Know that those things yeah, that's very true as well, actually. It could be damaged. But know that those things tend to have a long lead time and be ready for that. Know that some of those decisions might have to come earlier. And there's just nothing worse, as I said at the start, than you're like a deer in the headlights where your builder is like, where are the tiles? You're like, what tiles? And picking tiles is hard. Could take you 3 weekends to pick tiles.
And custom tiles or custom finishes could have very long lead times. The biggest lead time items for me, kitchen, obviously. If you're doing a custom kitchen, you could be talking 12, 16 weeks. Windows and doors, a long lead time as well. It could be 8, 10 weeks. It could be even longer.
Your house,
Yeah. If you're doing restoration in windows like I was, you have to integrate that with everything else and scheduling. So that has to be done kind of right. flooring thickness decision is something that actually needs to be known really early if you're pouring concrete, because the levels have to be right. So you need to know what floor you're picking. Is it 18 mil or is it 20 mil or whatever? So if they are pouring concrete or setting joists, that they're level.
So if you have, like I do, I've LVT throughout the ground floor of my house, and then I have tiles in my downstairs bathroom, and the thickness of the tile is really, really thick. It's like a big cement terrazzo tile. And so that means that it's much thicker than the LVT flooring. So that means that when they're pouring it, they have to allow for that height difference.
Yeah.
So that decision needs to be made early. Even if you haven't necessarily ordered it, you do need to know what the thickness is, because those millimeters make a big difference.
Yeah, and the same when we poured a new concrete slab here and we were laying our wood floor, they needed it super, super, super flat. Like there couldn't have been more than a few millimeters front to back a room. Otherwise the floor that we picked wouldn't have really fit, because it was kind of an individual piece parquet and there would have been too much play. And so they had to grind the concrete flat. Oh. Now, when I say this is a messy job, this is a messy job. So just knowing the scheduling of that and knowing how specific your finishes are to particular needs and levels and whatever, as early as you can kind of know that stuff, the better. So have things flagged. Or if you really are decision fatigued and you don't want to pick something straight away, pick a standard thickness for something. Now you've limited your shopping options, but at least you've made a decision that it's going to be an 18 mil floor or whatever. And say, I have to pick a floor, and you go into flooring place, you say, but it has to be 18 mil, that's all. But that's my biggest mistake or lesson learned, the scheduling in this part, and just knowing your long lead times, and don't be waiting, looking for stuff. Make sure it's ready to be delivered when they need it. Yeah, and absolutely. The key message here, if someone has to install it, you should be thinking about it really early.
And I think about it, most things are going to take 6 weeks. I think that's a good rule of thumb. Many things will take longer. Your kitchen will probably take longer, but most things will take at least 6 weeks. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah. They're the kind of, and then you're into the fun stuff, the finishing and the paint and whatever, and that's a whole other, discussion. But I think the key thing
these
here
are things
is
that can at least be changed.
Exactly.
If something goes wrong, you don't like the colour. Yes, it's expensive, but these things can be changed.
Yeah.
It can all be fixed.
My takeaways would be know the phases, know the drop dead dates from your contractor when specific finishes and things need to be decided or on site.
Yeah.
And then make your decisions as early as you possibly can to reduce your stress later. Yeah, that's mine.
Mine would be try to make your decisions together as a whole. So don't kind of go piecemeal, room by room, or, item by item. Try to, as much as you can, again, plan in advance, keep track of what you have decided. What do your switches look like? What does your flooring look like? Have it all, maybe all your samples together, or your mood board, or whatever it might be, and try to make the decisions together so it's cohesive and you're not doing things kind of piecemeal so it looks a bit hodgepodge. Just try to have it planned out as much as you possibly can. Yeah,
and look, those first fix phases are overwhelming for everyone.
Yeah.
You'll probably have a cry at some stage, you'll feel overwhelmed. There's a lot coming at you at once. But the more kind of prepared you can be and the more things you can have decided early, the better.
Yeah.
But that's mine. So we're going to do this for everything. We're going to do this for all our key topics.
So next week, we're talking about planning.
I think the planning process.
Do you need planning? What are the things you can do to make planning as smooth as possible?
I definitely have a few lessons learned in planning anyway. Yeah.
I just have fun in this country.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it time to see you next week?
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.